Well, thank you very much. It's really great to be here with all of you today. So I was asked to talk about membership, which is one of my all-time favorite subjects. So you might want to know, why would we want to grow Rotary membership? Well, Rotary is a membership organization, but the reason we want to grow our members is so that we have more hands and hearts to do more service, so we could do more good in the world. So Rotary has three ways to grow. When you look at all the different things we can do, you can break them down to three ways. One is to recruit new members to our current clubs. The second is to engage, or as some people call it, retain our current members. And the last way is to form new clubs. And then, of course, we have to have a good culture that wraps around our clubs in order to invite new members, keep our members, and also if it's a sponsor for a new club. So why focus on new clubs today? Well, I'm on the Rotary Membership Growth Committee, and what we found out is when we study the world, the areas of the world that are growing, and it makes sense, are the areas that are forming new clubs more than they're losing the old clubs. And then the areas that are losing membership are losing new clubs, are losing clubs, their current clubs, and not getting new clubs. So what I was asked to talk about is to actually tell you a little bit about forming new clubs. And please feel free to ask any questions as we go along, or if you have questions after, I'm glad to stay and answer any questions that you may have. So when we talk about forming clubs, the things that we want to talk about today really involve four important things. How to form one. So we're going to go step by step on how to do it. Um, what are the lessons we learned as we started other clubs around the world? What are the keys to success when you're starting a new club? And where are the opportunities most seen recently where you can form new clubs? So how do I form one? I used to put together this presentation, I used pictures of our Minnesota Veterans Club. We started the first ever Veterans Club in the world. And when I say Veterans Club, it's a cause-based club. And a cause-based club is a club that has its service projects, its speakers, and focuses everything around the cause it's trying to serve. Now, you don't have to be a veteran to be in the Veterans Club. We have members who are not veterans. Their administrator is actually a pastor who has a son-in-law who's an active duty person in the military. And so he wants to serve veterans. And it's not that they only do one area of service. They still serve youth by doing Toys for Tots. They do all the avenues of service, but they focus on serving veterans. And what's important to them is camaraderie, service, and peace. And all these pictures are actually real life pictures we took of the club. They're not stock photos. So the first step you need when you're forming a new club is you have to find a champion, a person or two is passionate about that cause. And when you start the club, you always put that cause first, and then Rotary comes after that. You know, when you form new clubs, it's not about forming a miniature club of the club you already have. Because let's face it, if we had the right Rotary club for every person that was in existence now, they'd join our current clubs. But these new clubs, they reach out into the community and bring forth new members, potential people of action in a new club, and they form the club around the way they want to do it. So usually your champion is someone who has a particular passion. They know why they want to start it, and they usually start it in their area. It's hard to start a club in an area that's not where you are. If you're a person who is passionate about a cause and you're in your community, you're seen as a person who can get something done. So the next thing you have to do is you have to recruit the right members. And again, you recruit them from your area. You recruit them from people that you know. You can go to other organizations that have a similar cause they're supporting. You know, we went to a number of different veteran groups in our area, VFWs. We went to the Yellow Ribbon and groups like that. But we had something that they didn't have. We actually had global grants. We had local grants. And we were able to help them get started. When this club started, within 2 weeks, they raised $20,000 through a district grant to redo the first floor of a home for homeless veterans. And you want to make sure that you have diversity. It reflects your community because clubs are stronger when they have different ideas. So when you start a club, and this is always hard to talk to uh, when you're talking to presidents-elect, because presidents, they feel like their job, which it is to grow their club. But there's a misconception out there that if you start a new club in your area, you're going to be taking Rotarians away from that club. And it doesn't work that way. You know, we started the first club to end human trafficking. We had three different districts that were in a consortium to do education, but they were going to quit Rotary. They were Rotary members, but they weren't doing any district grants. They were going to talk to clubs, but the clubs only wanted that speaker to speak maybe once a year. They didn't want the speaker every week. And these folks actually wanted to focus on that cause. So when we started that club, it's like every club we start, um, it's mostly new members. So we knew that from just our everyday experience of watching them form, but we asked Brian King, who's the Director of Membership Development at Rotary International, our head staff person who's charged with developing Rotary membership. We said, do you have any statistics? And at that time, they didn't. So what they did is they went back and studied all the new clubs that have formed within the last 5 years. And what they found out is 88% are brand new to Rotary. And it can be argued that that extra 12%, some of them may have left if we didn't form the new club. So that's just debunking the myth that if you start a club, it's going to decrease your membership in other clubs. So when you're starting a club, there's different ways to do it. Some people like to have a big meeting where they call everyone who's interested and bring a whole group of dozens of people together. What we found out in the clubs that we've started is it's best to meet in small groups. Because if you meet in a small group, those groups usually focus on what they have in common, when they want to meet, where they want to meet, that type of thing. These are three ladies who are all, one on the left is Kathy Army, the other is Kathy Navy, the other is Holly. Um, but this is the best way to start, we found, because people tend to agree easier in small groups. And when you get more people together, you can get more groups. But what it's important, step four, is to find out what your members want. So what we did is we actually had a facilitation where we asked them what they want. It was interesting because they said, we want camaraderie. That was their number one thing. Because in the service, you always have someone who's watching your back. But sometimes when you leave and you move back, especially if you're not moving back to your hometown or you haven't been home for a long time, you don't have that feeling that someone's watching your back. They also wanted to make sure that they worked towards peace. Many of them said that they joined the military because they were working towards peace. And it's interesting that the things they were saying in the service were all things that Rotary works towards. But you have to let them decide. It's best to let them decide everything about the club, from the name of the club to where they meet, when they meet, what kind of socials they have. You know, if I would have started a club that was just like my club, I belong to a traditional club, meets on Tuesday mornings at a country club. We have breakfast, we have a speaker, we meet 4 times a month. Well, I already asked my friends who I knew to join that club, and many of them did. But there were others who couldn't meet at that time, or didn't like that place, or didn't want to meet around a fixed cost meal. So when you're starting a club, remember it's about them and what they want. It's not about recreating your current club, because that club already exists. Now, the fifth step is it does take a little bit of money to start a club. So the old way to do it was to have a sponsoring club. And usually how that worked out is the largest, oldest club in the district would start a young professionals club. But you know, that doesn't always work when you want to start a club in an area that's not really populated. I mean, there might be an environmental club that you want to start in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Well, there may not be a Rotary club who would sponsor in that area. So when you start a club, it's always good to have something that you can offer the members who are joining this. When we talked to the veterans, at first they were a little bit skeptical. They thought we just wanted them for their money and for their people. So what we did was we passed what we call a pro-growth policy. So we went to the district, and the district took a vote that said, if you are a new club, you don't have to pay any district dues for the first year that you're in existence. So it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it showed the veterans that we had skin in the game too. We were interested in helping them out. And of course, you can have other clubs donate to the new club, which is always good because if you're starting a new club, whether it be you need a bell or a gavel or a flag or a banner or name tags or name tag holders, you can have the clubs in your area all give those gifts. They can put little plaques on with the name of your club on it. And what it does is it creates this buy-in. So when you have your initial charter ceremony, everyone could come and they feel like they're a part of it. And you'll be surprised in your district when you starting new clubs, other people come forward with other new clubs. The first one, there's always a little reluctance because if there hasn't been a club started in 10 years or more, people might think you don't need another Rotary Club. But when you survey the people in your area and find out they want to meet a different way, it's okay to meet a different way. And if it gets them into Rotary, it's all good. So the next step would be to actually hold an organizational meeting. Now, this is in the basement of a church, and of course, Rotary is apolitical, but sometimes you can get free facilities to meet. So what we usually do is we create a PowerPoint for them so they know how a typical Rotary meeting meets. But if they decide they don't want to do the four-way test, or they decide they don't want to have happy bucks, or they don't want to have a thought of the day or something like that, they don't have to. They can do it the way they want to do it. And when you bring these people together, one of the reasons you want to do that is you have to have officers when you form a club. And this is a good way for people to volunteer to be president or any of the other officers that are needed. But you just want to have them organized during the first meeting so they can see what a Rotary meeting is like, even if they don't choose to follow that. So the next step is to file the paperwork. And there's a really big misconception out there that it's hard to do. And the application is really not hard to do. For a Rotary Club, it's 4 pages. It's 3 pages for a Rotary Club. And for a satellite club, it's only 2 pages. And there's really only 4 things that you have to tender. That number 2 on their club constitution, you don't have to do that because club and district support at Rotary International actually has a form, and it just puts in the name and the club constitution. You don't want to draft a constitution from from scratch because they'll turn it down and say you have to follow our club constitution. But the bylaws you need to fill out. They need a membership list. They need payment, which is $15 per person, and an application. So the application, there's different ways to do it that make it a little bit easier. So the last page of every application is a list of your members. They'll ask things like name, address, phone number, alternate phone number. Do you want your Rotary magazine electronically, or do you want it a hard copy mailed in the mail? But the best thing to do is you could actually ask club and district support for a spreadsheet. And what the spreadsheet is it actually, you can fill it all on a spreadsheet instead of doing a different list, a different page for each member. Because if you don't do the spreadsheet and you have to have 20 members, you have 20 sheets. Now, the best thing to do is to fill this out as your new members come in, your charter members come in. Because in my first club that I started, I waited to the end to type them all in. It took a long time because someone had to type as I read it out and that kind of thing. So just do it as you go. And if there's something they don't have a second address, they don't have a second phone number, write not applicable in the application, because you don't want application put to the bottom because they think it's not complete. And of course, for a Rotary Club, you have to choose these officers: president, secretary, president-elect treasurer, membership chair, and Rotary Foundation chair. Now, they're usually people that volunteer to be these positions or have your organizational meeting, except the Rotary Foundation chair. Because remember, most of the members are new to Rotary, so they don't know a lot about the Rotary Foundation. But the key is you just need them to serve as the application's going in. If they want to appoint somebody else after or have another election for that person, they could do that at a separate time. So here in the US, I'm often asked the question, do you want to form an organization that's registered in your state with the Secretary of State's office? You don't have to, it's not required by Rotary International, but most clubs do. And the reason they do is they like to have a bank account. I've seen those clubs that start and it's in a person's name and the software is in that person's name and that person wants to leave, it gets difficult. But if you actually have a corporation, an LLC or a regular corporation in the state of California, in your case, it helps with the continuity of the club. Now, you shouldn't put in for the corporation with the California Secretary of State's office until such time as you actually receive the approval from Rotary International. Because sometimes they might add an identifier to your name, like comma CA, because you're located in California. You don't have to go through with a name change at the Secretary of State's office. Again, the Constitution is something that you don't have to do, you don't have to draft. They will fill that out for you. But the bylaws, which is more the everyday operating, duties and how your procedures are, those are where you can put in the things that are specific for your club if they are not traditional. But if you need any of those forms, just reach out to me. I'm happy to help. So again, this is the last page that you have to fill out, and this is the spreadsheet you can fill out instead of the last page when you're working on your membership list. And of course, there's a fee. Make sure that when you file your paperwork, the number of members match with your fee payment. If you start getting additional members, usually you get like 15 members, and it's kind of like a little stall. And then after you get 20, then a bunch of people come in. Don't keep adding them. Go ahead and get your paperwork approved, get those initial members paid, and add the new members after that. Because every time you tender something different to Rotary International, your application gets put in the bottom of the pile at Club and District Support. So you want the numbers to match up with your check, basically. Now, this is an important point. You actually want to celebrate when you get your club started. You might feel like you're tired because it took a few months to get this club started, but the charter event's very important. First of all, it gives all your new members that feeling that they're special. We did for this club, we gave them a certificate all framed that said they were a charter member. And a lot of times when you're forming a club, that's motivating to people to say that they're a charter member of the club and not wait until after and then just be a member but not a charter member. It also gives an opportunity for all those charter members to have their families come and see what Rotary is all about. And sometimes your second wave of members comes from the family members of the people who joined the first time. It gives you an opportunity to put out a little press release. You could have radio and TV and that kind of stuff come, especially if it's a new club in your area. It's a great feel-good story, and that gives you more publicity. So there's lots of reasons to have it, but it does give you a chance to celebrate. So then when you have your club formed, what you need to do is you need to have projects. Nobody actually joins a club just to join a club. They join a club because they have like minds, they want to do good in the world. But you got to make sure that what you're doing in your club and the projects you're doing match with the cause that people joined for. So in this case, this is that homeless veterans home I told you where they redid the first floor so they could have poker and darts and foosball and all that. They could have that camaraderie. Now, it doesn't mean they don't do projects with other clubs. I mean, this club actually, during the holidays time, they get together with other clubs and they write letters and cards to active military. Some of the cities in our area have veterans memorials. So this club goes out and cleans them. So, they do all the things that they do, but they have their own projects too. They're big into doing blood drives. They do a lot of building beds for kids who don't have beds. But the important thing is they stay true to their mission, which is serving veterans. And when they find out about Rotary and what we're doing to cure polio and that we had people at the United Nations when it was forming, they get to be Rotary and they get to be a Rotary club. But again, it's important to let them focus on their cause when they get started. So all the new clubs that started and have been successful, they all had a passionate champion. They all deal with camaraderie and friendship. People want to serve together. They don't really want to serve alone. And they did want to serve. They don't want to just get together. They want to do something. And that was different with our club compared to a VFW or Veterans of Foreign Wars, where you go and you can get a drink. So you have camaraderie, but you're not doing that service. And Rotary is all about doing that service. Most of them started with friends. And what we found out is the clubs that don't just start on their own, but they usually have support of an existing Rotary club or the district, they're 42% more likely to thrive after and not go away. So the next thing is, where do we see clubs forming? We see a lot of veterans clubs forming. It's interesting when you form a club like this, other areas around the world start forming those same clubs. And human trafficking, when we started that, we were the first one in the world. There's about a dozen now. Clubs that serve people with autism and their families. Environmental clubs are really big. Literacy clubs, ones that focus on water projects, sanitation, hygiene. A couple clubs in Australia are working on ending homelessness. And really, any place that you can do service, you can have a club around it. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have because I want you to leave with the answers to any questions you had coming in today. So I'm happy to take any questions. Now, I couldn't have done that good a job if there's no questions.
Well, Gump, I wanted to put a spin-off on the questions. In existing clubs, let's say in communities that we want to expand the membership, I was just thinking as you're talking and sharing your information, it's about how do we invite them, those people that are passionate about, let's say, veterans, and maybe form a committee within the club itself that actually focuses on nothing but doing serve for veterans. You have in there about autism. Find those in our community that are passionate about that, bring them into our clubs, give them the opportunity. We already have formed all those paperwork and legal documents that you were talking about, and just give them the opportunity to support them with projects of that nature. Have you seen something like that in your experience?
I have, and that's a very good question. Thank you very much for bringing it up. And the important thing is when you're doing that, though, make sure that you're doing the projects and you're serving the people that your club wants. It's interesting because Rotary International says you should do a survey once a year. And, I think about that often. Why do you do it once a year? Well, if you think about it, there's new people coming into your club all the time, and there's other people who are leaving your club. So you want to be in a culture where everyone feels that they're being listened to. So the way to do that is to do a survey. Ask your members, where do you want to do service? Because, in my club, um, we get into a situation where we do the same projects year after year. And what we found out is we see some people every once in a while drifting away. When we started that Rotary Community Corps that was talked about in that very kind introduction, what we did was we brought 5 clubs together and we started serving these Afghan refugees. Well, we actually saw some people coming back. So yes, some of the refugees, when they got jobs and started being more part of the community, they joined Rotary. But what we also saw is other people who were tired to do these same service projects actually come back and start doing those service projects. And they start coming to our socials and start attending the meetings. So the important thing is to ask your club members, what kind of projects do they want to do? Because what they're doing now may be what they want to do, but they may want to do something else. So it's good to keep it fresh. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Tom. That kind of goes along with following your passion and giving the opportunity to all of our members to follow their passion, right?
Right.
And I think we have Kathy Smith. Do you have a question?
Yes. I'm wondering, you didn't address Rotaract at all.
Well, thank you very much for bringing that up. Rotaract, in Rotary, for a long time, we were trying to elevate Rotaract. And last year, they have been now officially classified as a club type. So they are members, just like Rotarians. But I'm really glad you brought that up because any club that we start for a Rotary club, we could also start as a Rotaract club. And there's certain advantages to a Rotaract club. The dues are less and things like that. So we very much want to start Rotaract clubs. We want to start satellite clubs. We want to start companion clubs. And they all have different names to them, and I could talk about each one of them, but they're just club types. For 110 years, we had the same type, which is a traditional club, and that works great for me. I love being in my traditional club. But now Rotary in 2016 at that council legislation gave us the opportunity to have different club types. And why do we do that? Because different people want to serve in different ways and they want to meet in different ways. And there's no reason that if there's a group of people who can't come during the day because they're teachers or they're young professionals just starting their jobs, they don't want to leave work during the day, there's no reason they can't meet at night. If they don't like having that fixed cost meal at the country club or hotel and on Monday through Wednesday, they want to meet at night At a bar, that's fine. We're all about doing service. There's a group of clubs out of North Carolina called Impact Clubs, and they're basically a satellite club. So if you have a traditional club and they start a smaller group, but it's still part of that club, it just meets at a different time, a different place, that's a satellite club. Well, they in North Carolina have these Impact Clubs. What an Impact Club is, they don't have any meetings other than they go do a service project. So they'll meet at the food bank and they'll unbox the boxes, stack the shelves, make the banana bread. Another time they might meet at a senior care facility and sing and make flowers and put flowers in vases, but they don't like to come to meetings. You can do that. If you want to have a club that just meets to do mountain biking, they still want to do the service, they still work on the trails, but they want to do it their way. There's nothing wrong with that. We have, a lot of people in Rotary. We have 2.1 million, 2.4, depending on, the numbers and if you include the Rotaractors. But just think if we had clubs that met the way everyone wanted to meet, we could have 10 million instead of the number we have now. Because if you think about it, back in like 1996, the average club size was just over 60. Today, it's just under 30, but we're still at that same 1.2 million, 1.4 if you include Rotaractors. Why is that? Because we've started new clubs. And mostly in the Southern Hemisphere is where we're growing. And that's mostly because they're starting new clubs. In the Northern Hemisphere, we're losing members, but we're not starting new clubs. So the idea is if we start new clubs that are different, still has the same Rotary values, they still do the service. They're Rotarians, they're just meeting in a different way. We know we can grow because we'll attract more people.
Yes, Tom, this is Philip Serene here. I'm with the Calistoga Rotary Club in the Napa Valley. So we have about 60 members, and our population is about 5,000 people. So it's not that much. And over the years, we always talk about starting a breakfast club, because right now we are a noon club, because to accommodate some younger members. But we never got to do it. So I'm interested to hear more about what you call a satellite club. You say the application is only 2 pages, so I assume it's a simpler way to start a club. And so what is it? How do you set it up? Thank you.
A satellite club is very easy to set up. It only takes 8 members. You need 8 members for a satellite. You need 20 members for a Rotary club, and you need a recommended 12 for a Rotaract club. But a satellite club is a group of your club members who don't want to meet or can't meet at the same time as your club does. So if you have 60 members in your club, and this happened in our district a couple years ago, we had a club in Monticello, it's a couple hours north of where I am, and they had 8 school teachers who were passionate Rotarians, but they cannot come to a meeting. That club met at a hotel at noon on Fridays. So what the teachers did is they formed their own satellite club. So they're still members of the parent club, the host club, but they meet on Friday night. They get pizza and subs. And it's a little bit more casual, but they're still members of that club. So they count towards that club's membership. Sometimes they charge additional dues, sometimes they don't, but they still participate in a major gala or the major projects. They just do it at a different time. Now, satellite club can be a satellite club that grows and eventually it gets so large it ends up being its own club. Or it could just stay the size it is and, the way it is. So that's basically the long and short of the satellite. Some people don't like that word satellite club, so they call it a companion club. But a companion club usually intimates that they're not going to grow and be their own club. We had a couple clubs here. We had a club here that was having problems growing, and they decided they were going to change their lunch meeting to a breakfast meeting, so they lost some members. Then they changed it back a year later and lost more members. We had a club that was right next door, same city. They decided to have a satellite club, which was young professionals, mostly children of the parents. Average age in Rotary now, it's worldwide is 62. They met at their own at a bar at night. Both clubs ended up growing. The young professional club started recommending people to their parents' clubs, and the parents started recommending to their friends who had children to the other club, and they both grew. So sometimes that flexibility is important. And if it's as easy as filling out that 2-page document and letting them do what they do on their own, that's just great.
So just a follow-up question, do they also have their own president and board, or is it, do they have the same, I mean, do they belong to the original club?
They belong to the original club, but they do have their own bylaws. And usually, you don't have to change, most times you don't have to change the host club's bylaws, unless for some reason there's a prohibition against starting satellite clubs, but we never really see that. But the satellite club sometimes wants to do their own bylaws because they feel like they have a different mission. And sometimes they have a different focus. But sometimes it's just as they want to have their own meeting time and meeting place. So if we can add flexibility, there's no reason not to give people what they want. Let's face it, if we give them the Rotary they want, they stay, they feel happy, they invite their friends. If we're not giving them what they want, then they walk. And when they walk, sometimes they don't say the best things about us because they left because that culture didn't fit them. Well, sometimes there's divergent cultures, and if you start a satellite club, they're still part of the same club, but they can do Rotary the way they want to do it. It's all about that flexibility. You know, we had a club I helped in Denver that started in a district to the east of me, and they started out with a good number, but then they started losing people. They took their meetings and took them online, and then they invited a bunch of ROTECs, which are people who used to be a youth exchange student. Now they're a liaison between the youth exchange students and the host families. And that added a bunch of energy, and they grew. So sometimes you just have to change things up. You could take a regular club and you could turn it into a cause-based club. We did that with a club that was going out of business in Texas, right outside of Houston. And we turned that into a veterans club, and it's thriving. And now it has its own Interact club. So the important thing is to ask your members what they want and give it to them. You know, it's so interesting because I get calls sometimes from people that say, okay, we have an issue. How do I solve this issue? And about a year ago, I got a call from a president who said, half our club wants to do away with the 4-way test, and the other half wants to keep the 4-way test. And they're both passionate about it. What do I do? And I said, you know, well, why don't you do a survey, find out what people want, and then call me back. It turns out this club was about 25 people. Only 2 people wanted to do away with the 4-way test, but they just happen to be very loud people. So sometimes having that information, you can go back and say, we heard what you said, because your people feel like they're being listened to just because you did the survey. And then if you actually perform in that survey, they feel like they're being listened to, they feel like they belong, they want to stay. So when that president went back and said, we know that the majority want to keep it, so we're going to keep it, things ended up being okay after that. So a lot of times it's just getting that buy-in, and the best way to do that is a survey. Now the question is, when do you do a survey? You know, Rotary has 7 different types of assessment tools, and one's called an exit interview. I'm not super high on the exit interview because, you know, Rotarians are good people. They sometimes don't tell you the truth of why they're leaving. And even if they did, there's not enough time to change the club and make a positive change to keep them. So I think doing an interview when people come in and doing an annual interview, I think is a good thing.
Thank you, Tom. That actually gives an opportunity to see where things are and make adjustments as needed. I was just thinking about what you mentioned with the satellite club, and definitely here in the club and in person, many of us, we have children that are about the same age, and we can easily suggest to have their own kids table, per se, on their satellite club, which still belongs to the Ukiah or the South Ukiah club. That's a nice thing about that. And it's as you mentioned, it's not about competing or creating something new or stealing from one club or the other. It's actually the suggestion of the satellite club is actually growing our own club by giving them the opportunity and the freedom as they need to be able to perform with their passion, which is something very important, and give them the opportunity to serve with Rotary. So any suggestions from the audience here at the restaurant? Ladies and gentlemen?
Right.
So great, everybody, to see you here at the meeting today. Safe travels
Thank
again.
you.
Have a good one.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Have a great day.